Welcome back to Citywide Blackout, and here we are, the close of 2025. It's been one hell of a year, and to wrap up this season, our guest is author Brad Ricks for his recent release through Crystal Lake Publishing, The Night Crew 2, Bloodlust. Brad talks about the new challenges awaiting the team, making a series out of a standalone, and so much more. Citywide Blackout starts right now.
Welcome to Citywide Blackout with your hosts, Max Bowen and Curtis Hughes. With years of experience in journalism, music, and entertainment business, they put their knowledge to work, bringing you the best in-depth, fun, and sometimes outrageously bizarre interviews with authors, musicians, and many other creators from around the world. With the right amount of gusto and a few F-bombs thrown in for emphasis, you're sure to have a good time. So put up your feet, grab a beverage, and let's go.
Was that always the plan to do a number 2 for this book?
Actually, no. When I first sat down to write The Night Crew, I was going to write just a fun little vampire novel. I mean, I say fun, and then, I mean, as normal, we would say if it's like, oh, The Lost Boys is a fun movie to watch. So I originally sat down, I was like, I want to write a vampire novel. Horror is what I enjoy reading. It's what I enjoy watching. I was like, I want to write that also. I was writing this novel of this team of hunters and doing all this. And then I was probably listening to a podcast or something along the lines about writing. And they were like, your antagonist needs to have a motive, some kind of a driving force behind them. So as the story is evolving and, you kind of, as you're writing a book, you're kind of digging away and figuring out kind of what's going on. And my characters, I just kind of let them talk. My antagonist, he started talking about this kind of bigger world and these things that were happening and why he was doing what he was doing. And as I was doing this, I was like, I think I just made a series, and I did not, so I didn't necessarily go at it as I was going to write a series. But as it started to unfold, I realized that the world kind of grew big. It opened up this series, and I was like, all right, this is something I can work with. In that, I started plotting out not just the plot of the first book and what happened, but what would be the longer story arc. Almost think of like a television series where every episode it could be a self-contained episode. X-Files used to be the creature of the week, but at the same time, overarching was like, are aliens real? Was like the overarching season stuff. So as I was writing the first Night Crew, I was like, I think I can do this in book form. And so that each book is its own kind of self-contained little, story, but there's an overarching story that can take us through the series.
I think it's a good problem to have, actually, when you initially think, this will be a one-off, a one and done. You get the end, you realize, oh, shit, I guess we'll do a 2, and then maybe a 3 and a 4 and a 5, and who knows. Having this sudden thing where you have this, potentially long running series, did you have to kind of like figure out, oh crap, I gotta like have some like new ideas pronto?
Fortunately, the way the world grew, and pretty much it was doing nothing more than just saying everything that kind of goes bump in the night is real, and there's an organization that makes sure they stay in line. And as soon as I did that, like, coming up with ideas kind of became, I don't want to say became easy, because it's never like an easy thing. But I mean, being a horror fan, watching the X-Files, watching Supernatural, watching these shows that, I love watching, it suddenly was like, I got kind of ideas galore I could kind of throw at this. The second book, I wanted to kind of keep with that kind of monster hunting kind of, thing to it, like that the first book has. And the first book was all about vampires. And so I was like, well, what's something that's not been done a lot? And we had taken my wife and I had taken a trip to New Orleans, and I was like, this would be a great setting for a book. And, thank you, Anne Rice. And so, and then I was like, I was like, ooh, what if I do something like with like a succubus? And that's not something that's a normal monster that you see in books. And so I started doing more research and learned some of even the lore behind those like Lilith and things like that. And I was like, okay, great. I could throw this at it. And then, now I've already finished book 3 and going through edits on it. And with it, I'm like, hey, we're gonna throw some werewolves. And so book 3 will be werewolf stuff. I started in pencil out book 4, and I'm like, I got more ideas for book 4. And so, each one I wanted to make where the world is like expanding, and you're, the main character, he's the one it's in first person in the first book. I jumped out of that, came to third person in the second, mainly because I wanted you to get more in contact with some of the other characters. So I kind of jumped out of just being in the one character's head, but you're still kind of learning the world with him. He's definitely, so Mike is the main protagonist throughout the whole series. So you are kind of learning the world with him, but each book is kind of giving me that ability to, all right, let me add a little bit more lore here, and just keep expanding this world. And so it's a fun little adventure to go on.
And it sounds like you're having a lot of fun doing it too.
Oh, I am. It is a blast to kind of jump heads. I mean, I definitely have my favorite characters. So even of the characters, like the ones that I have in there, Nikki, for instance, she's just a badass, and so it's real fun writing, from her perspective. And then of course I always, my wife is always kind of my first reader and editor, and so whenever I'm writing from a female's perspective, she is very critical of me and making sure that I get it right. She gives me crap about one line that I had done in Night Crew 2, and she was like, a woman would never say this. She was like, this is a guy writing a woman. I was like, I don't know. I'm pretty sure I've heard females say that. She's like, no, you haven't. She's like, if you have, it was a guy writing a girl. She was like, no. She was like, cut it.
Wow. And did you cut it?
Yes, I did. And then I noticed I actually had it in there twice. And so I cut it once. And so the line did sneak in there. Yeah. Now it wasn't when Nikki said it. So it was late. It was earlier in the book, and it was a guy saying it. And so it's like, okay, well, I live with that. So a guy saying it's fine, but a guy saying it about a woman is fine. But she was like, yeah, but a woman will never say that. So
Fair enough. I like that honesty, actually. I feel like that kind of feedback, they need to be brutally honest. They had to be like, nope, this is terrible. Like your wife says, a woman would never say this. This is clearly a guy. So that helps you.
It definitely does. I mean, there's certain perspectives that, being a guy, I'm not going to know, and I'm not going to be able to come at. And so it definitely does help to have that perspective. And she's definitely brutally honest. Every time I finish a book, I print it out, and she gets like the big, huge stack of printed out, and then I hand it to her, and she goes through and she starts reading, and then she breaks out the red pen. She used to be a teacher, so she breaks out the red pen, and then later, about a month or so later, she hands me back the manuscript, and I look at it. I'm like, I have failed a test. And
well, that's an F. Oh well.
Yeah, definitely. And then I start going through and I start putting in those edits, and so that's always my kind of first round of edits. And she definitely helps to clean up all the, I've learned so much about commas from her, past participles, and all that kind of stuff that I realized I did not do as good in English when I was in school as I probably should have.
No
Especially
one did.
now that I'm being an author.
Yeah, really.
I was like, I should probably have been a lot better in English class.
I should have paid attention to grammar. Damn it. Oh well.
Those stupid commas.
Exactly.
There's so many rules.
Exactly. Damn you, Oxford comma. I will never adhere to your draconian rules. But let us talk about what's going to be happening in Bloodlust. So Michael and his team, the Night Crew, they feel like, hey, we've seen it all, we've done it all, but now they're up against something else. Without spoiling things, what are they up against, and how is this going to be challenging the team?
So I tried to keep it a secret for a good long while, and what the monster they were going up against in the second one. Now you can go onto Amazon and Goodreads and see it in comments, and so it's not a secret. Succubus is what they're going against, and not just one but 4. I did a lot of research in regards to succubi, and I learned that there were like 4 kind of main ones. If you look at the different religions, it was, I'm going to butcher every one of the names, but Lilith. There's a crap, I'm gonna forget their names right now. Anyway, so it won't matter. But they're so it's Lilith and three others, and it's all throughout. Like different religions kind of have these in them. So I kind of took it as okay, there are four of them. They're the only four in existence. The council, which is kind of the ruling group that's over all of the monsters and all that. Everybody always thought that they were extinct. Like they went extinct back in the Middle Ages, and they don't exist. Well, they do. They've just been able to be in hiding because of their powers, and being able to kind of control people like they have. They've just kind of just existed under the radar, and so it's allowed them to kind of do what they want, and they've kind of remained silent. But with all the stuff that happened after in the first book with the council, now they're kind of like, who cares? We can do what we want. And so they, in New Orleans, decided to, hey, let's just, some more than others, were like, hey, let's just kind of do what the hell we want. And so that's what they do, leaving a, trail of bodies, that then draws the attention of the night crew. And so they go to find out, hey, what's killing people, and then how do we stop it?
And who are the Night Crew? For those of us who are kind of new to the series, new to this book, who are they?
So the Night Crew, and that's kind of a name they gave themselves, and it's really a group of monster hunters. But if the monsters kind of, or creatures of the night, or what you want to call them, if they kind of get out of line. So, like I said, in this world, there's a thing called the Council, which is kind of has like the ruling families of, so there's a handful of vampires, there's a couple of werewolves, there's all this kind of, that are on the council, and they have come up with an agreement with like humans. And they call it the agreement, the Accords. And it pretty much is like, okay, we can't kill more than this many people, and we can't we can't turn this, more than this number. And it's like a rules of engagement almost kind of thing. And that's what kind of keeps the peace. It makes sure that, the vast population of human population has no idea that monsters actually exist. It's to kind of help maintain order. Well, after anytime somebody, and like in the first one, it's like the main bad guy, he's wanting to create chaos and kind of wreak havoc in society and kind of build an army. Well, he's now operating outside of the Accords, so thus the council calls on a group such as the Night Crew. So this group, a team of hunters, to go and say, all right, take him out. And so they then go in and they investigate, or, they have their little kill orders to go and do, to take out whatever kind of, monster it is.
This sounds like a lot of world building, though. I mean, it sounds like you spend a lot of time just kind of constructing all the different, like you said, the different groups and the rules and everything like that. How long would you say you spent doing that before you actually started writing this?
Well, so that's what's kind of funny about it, is that I really didn't. Like I said, it kind of came out as it was like midway through, I kind of slowly started talking about some of the different pieces. And because you're coming at it from the standpoint of Mike, who's brand new to this world, in the first book, it opens with his wife being murdered, and he doesn't get much help from the authorities. So he does a little investigates on his own, and he comes face to face with his wife's killer, who is a vampire. And he himself almost becomes, a joke I like to tell, he himself almost becomes food for thought. And so when I'm at book events or I'm running a booth, that's a joke I like to say. But the Night Crew jumps in and saves him, and that's how he kind of gets pulled into this world. You as the reader are learning the rules and learning what's happening as Mike is. So as the world is expanding and things are growing, you're learning it too. It wasn't like I didn't do a lot of like info dumping in the first book, because I don't want to do that. I hate that. Love Lord of the Rings, hated the info dumping. But I love Lord of the Rings. Don't get me wrong. So no haters out there. I'm a huge, Tolkien fan. Yeah, when it comes to a lot of sci-fi, if there's or fantasy, if there's too much like just raw info dumping, you have to kind of like layer that in, or it does kind of get stale. As things are happening, I'm kind of peeling back some of the layers of things. And so I didn't do a lot of world building when I first went into it. As I learned and as I realized this was becoming a series, I did have to kind of pause and say, all right, what are kind of my hierarchies, and how am I building out the council, and how am I doing, so there were some of that I had to do. But kind of going into it, I went into it almost blind, almost like Mike did, and like I said, things kind of unfolded, it just kind of happened.
I have to agree that I do not like the info dump style of writing. Like, obviously, you get to share the lore, but kind of space it out, spread it out. Don't spend the first like 100 pages just burying us in background. It's going to get old fast, especially if you're doing like a horror book or something that's going to have to shift gears. Like, guys, I came for a horror book, not for a documentary.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's, even in something like a Lord of the Rings, for instance, he goes into such depth in certain areas, but there's other things that really don't get touched. But because there's such depth and information about one, you kind of assume the other's there. I like use example in talking about that, and I've in regards to things like, think of Lord of the Rings. What's the monetary system that they have? Like, I don't know. But there's so much lore and stuff that's there, you just kind of assume that there is one, but we don't ever talk about it.
Exactly. Yeah, we have no idea. I mean, does it vary between like the elves and the dwarves? Do the humans have their own version? Do the hobbits have their own version? I don't know.
Right. You don't know, but I mean, that there is something because of how much information that Tolkien puts into everything else, that you just know it's there. It just wasn't pertinent to what was needed. And so, there's so much that's is expounded upon, that the things that aren't, you just assume it's just there anyway.
Exactly. Well, it's not enough that the night crew has to fight these demons. They also have to fight their own as well. This is what I've read, and I really like this aspect. How does this factor into the book?
So part of, especially in doing a sequel, I had to kind of ramp up the tension, with it, and kind of with each book like that, you kind of ramp up the tension. And then, not to kind of spoil book one, but if you haven't read book one, pause and go read it. Or
exactly, stop right here, go read the book.
Or it's been out since February, you should have read it already. So at the end of the first one, so Mike gets turned into a vampire, and so part of the bloodlust is that he himself is, as a new vampire, is having to learn how to control himself. So not only I've added a character onto the night crew who does have supernatural abilities, so I can't just throw just a normal random creature. I have to kind of keep upping the stakes, and no pun intended. And so I have to kind of, but you kind of keep ramping things up. And so one of the ways to do that, as I was kind of coming at it and approaching book two, is, well, yes, I have 4 very powerful creatures that they're having to go against, but also I want Mike to also be very much like, he doesn't trust himself, because he's a new vampire, and as a new vampire, how do I control this, these urges? And he doesn't. It's almost that, if I think back to some of like Anne Rice in Interview with the Vampire, when Louis gets first turned, he's like, I don't want to drink from humans, and I don't want, he's very much conflicted. And so I definitely channeled some of that, and like he doesn't want to like give in. He almost did at the end of Night Crew. He almost did and almost attacked his own team. But so he's very much like, that's no. I'm just going to drink from these blood bags. That's all I'm going to do. I'm not. And so as they're in battles and struggles, and if they're in fights, well, naturally, somebody's going to get punched and a lip's going to get cut or something. There's going to be blood that's around, and he has got to learn how to control himself in this. So not only is there the tension of, okay, well, we got 4 supernatural creatures against R1, but R1 doesn't trust himself very well. And so in doing that, I was able to kind of tamp down, his ability a little bit, because, again, he doesn't trust himself. So he doesn't want to kind of go full vampire. He's definitely struggling with, I'm new and I don't want to be bad. So
Now, this book is coming. Now, this book is out through our good friends at Crystal Lake Publishing. Certainly, we featured a number of the writers over the years, an absolutely great publishing company. How did you
Love
come
them.
to their attention, and what's been like working with them?
It's been great work with them. I love the team over there. Joe and Neijing, and they're just some awesome group. So I actually had a kind of a funny story in how I kind of got in contact with them. So Night Crew actually first got picked up by a different publishing company. The guy over there, after a while, him and I got to chit chatting, and he was like, "Okay," he goes, "I didn't realize this was like a series," and so he was like, "So," he goes, "We're gonna have to kind of space out when we're putting the books and all this kind of stuff," and he was like, "Well, I got a lot of stuff on the docket," and so he had reached out to Crystal Lake and was because he had a lot of books that he was trying to work through, and at the time we were doing 2 books a month release, and it was really a lot of overload. And so he was like, all right, he asked Joe over at Crystal Lake, he was like, hey, here are some of the books I have that are coming out down the line. Are you interested in any of these? And Joe read Night Crew and was like, yeah, I want that. And so he ended up picking up the Night Crew. And when Joe and I first, talked, he was like, yeah, he goes, we'll do that. We'll look at doing, maybe like a 3-book series and kind of see how it's going. And after the first book came out, he was like, yeah, just however many you want to write, just keep going. So it did really well for them. It's been a very popular title for them for this year. And then Night Crew 2 came out just a couple weeks ago. It's still the #1 new release in vampire horror. I think tomorrow it'll be out 3 weeks, and it's still it hit #1 new release in vampire horror and has kind of stayed there the whole time. And it was the top US horror new release for like a day or two, long enough for me to get the screenshot, so it happened. So it's like, that's what's important. I got the banner. Yeah, so it's definitely a popular series. I have a lot of people who, as soon as they read book 2, they're like, okay, book 3, let's go.
Exactly. Where is it? Exactly.
They're like, where book 3? I'm like, book 3 is in edits right now.
It's like patience, folks. Patience.
Yeah, like I'm working on their standalone right now, and then I'm going into 4, so don't worry. I was like, the goal is 7, so after that we'll kind of see where it goes. But this story arc, I'm looking at 7 books.
Wow, and I love that Joe was just like, as many as you want, I will not stop you. That's he's all aboard on the Night Crew series. He's loving it, and so yeah, he's been awesome to work with. Been very pleased with the team over at Crystal Lake. Getting the #1 in vampire horror banner, that's certainly an amazing thing, and certainly great, great for you. Does that make you work harder getting that, or is it more just like, that's awesome, but I'm still gonna like do what I do?
Yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I do look at it and I see that, and it's not so much that because I grabbed the banner that I'm like, oh well, now I need to work harder. It's just as it's more so than what I'm hearing from readers, and I hear that feedback of how much they're like, oh my god, this one was even better than the first, and I'm like, well, deep down, I'm like, oh, I don't want them to say that the third one was worse than or you want to almost kind of keep pushing that or putting that pressure on you to say, well, I got to keep making them better and better. You don't want it to be like, oh yeah, 1, 2, and 3 were great, but 4 kind of sucked a little bit. And then, so I mean, think when you get into like, from movies, when you start looking at like the Halloween series, and you're like,
yeah.
1 and 2 were great. Yeah, we won't talk about 3. I mean, 3 was good on its own. Then you had like 4 and 5. Let's ignore 6. Let's move. So I want to kind of avoid that as much as possible. There's that pressure I kind of put on myself of being like, okay, I got to make sure I don't want any of it to be, somebody reads it and be like, well, he just kind of phoned this one in. And so, I always try to, make sure that the story is there. It's progressing the overall story arc. At the same time, what's happening in the, that mission or what they're doing is also, it's driving the characters forward. It's driving the story, and it in and of itself is a good story.
Yeah. So let's also talk about cover art, because looking at the art for this one, holy shit, Brad, this is absolutely amazing. Who did this?
It's amazing, and so his name is Martin Van Vuren, with a V, not a B. Everybody keeps saying, "Oh, like the president?" It's like, no, not Van Vuren. Martin Van Vuren is his name, and I think I'm pronouncing his name right. I want to say it's like sweet. It's Vuuree and something like that. Him and we kind of emailed back and forth talking about. I was like, yeah, as you know, I wanted to try to keep similar theme to like what's in on the first cover, and I was like, having on the first one, it's got skull with the like the machetes kind of crisscrossing it. I was like, so I like having some kind of thing like that on it, and so he started sending stuff with like a kind of a creature on the front. I was like, oh yeah, I kind of like that. And then he started kind of blending it like it did, where it's almost like kind of almost coming out of the coming out of it almost, and had that kind of white infusion that's happening. And yeah, it was probably about the second or third iteration of that, and I was like, oh my god, this is amazingly beautiful. It's like I love this cover.
Oh, I do too. Like the cover it just like jumps out at you, you know. And I know the old adage is you don't judge a book by its cover, but really you do.
I keep telling people judge all day long.
Exactly.
It's like, yeah. I was like, I've even made that joke before. It's like, yeah, they say don't judge a book by its cover, but yeah, damn it, do it, please.
Oh yeah.
Judge all day long.
Like I feel like the best covers are the kind where you say, you know what, I want to make this a poster. I want to get like a high res version, print it out, make it like a 12 by 16 poster, and put it in my room.
So I do have a poster of that one.
Of course you do.
Yep. I actually I don't sell them on my website, but I did numbered prints for that poster or for that book cover.
Cool.
I only sell it in person just because I don't think there's no way to ship a poster and it not get ruined.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's like I don't want to roll it. I got a handful of prints, and I went ahead and like I did a series and on the back of them, and then in person I sell them and I sign them. So yeah, that's something I'll like I said, do in person, but yeah, it's kind of hard to ship those, and so I haven't. They're not on my website. But yeah, but no, that was one I was like, yeah, I'm doing a poster, and I was talking to a guy at the last event I was at who did T-shirts. And so I've thought about doing a lot of times, especially with horror, it's usually black shirt and stuff like that. So he had some nice, good, thick white T-shirts, and so I'm looking at doing a white that has that kind of creature, the creature thing on the front of it, and then like on the back saying Night Crew, but the front is just nothing but that the image of the creature kind of coming out of the white like that, and so I'm kind of chatting with him on doing some shirts for it.
Well, Brad, when that time comes, count me in for one. Definitely.
Will do.
But I want to ask about the writing process for this. Were there any particularly challenging portions when it came to this book? And if there were, how'd you overcome them?
So the main challenges I had with this one was making sure things that I had commented on or kind of set up in book one, I didn't step on my toes in book two. I definitely needed to, before I started writing book two, I had to go back to book one and was like, okay, I remember talking about character descriptions. What color hair does Nikki have, and what color, so I had to kind of remind myself on some of the character descriptions. Now I have I kind of have my own little Bible now for each character. But as I was doing book one, not realizing this was becoming a series, I didn't think of any of that. You can kind of do your character descriptions and move about your day. Well, in book two, you still want to occasionally you have to kind of remind people what people look like, because it may have been a couple months or so since you've read the first one. And so I had to kind of make sure that, okay, yeah, if I said she has brown hair, I got to make sure still has brown hair. She didn't suddenly become a blonde. I had to kind of make sure my character descriptions were good. If there were certain mannerisms that were in the first, I had to make sure I kept those in the second. And so there were things like that was probably the hardest, just to make sure that I ensured continuity in that regard. Once I kind of had the continuity piece to it and make sure that was kind of stayed consistent. The story itself wasn't very hard to kind of lay out. Then it kind of gets into my normal kind of story creation process, but it was really that, making sure that stuff I set up in book one, I still have in book two, and so that was the main thing. And I kind of had to do the same thing again as I was doing three. There was, certain little things that I may have mentioned in one and two that, and I mean, make sure in three, timelines, for instance, when did Josh join the group and when did this, and so as I'm making sure that timelines line up with stuff, I can't I can't say, oh, this happened like 6 months ago, and a reader goes, well, that was in the middle of the first night crew, and you didn't mention it. So I have to kind of keep those timelines in sync. Now, like I said, I kind of have a Bible that I'm working off of, and make sure that it's as I'm writing and I make a little note of something, I make sure and put it in my little, almost like my own little wiki for the night crew, so that I can make sure and say, okay, when did this person join? Okay, when I made an offhanded comment about a hunt they went on here, I got to make sure that I'm not overstepping if I say something again later on. The casual reader may not know, but I mean, if knock on wood, this kind of takes on the following of like a supernatural or something like that, I mean, there will be people who will dive in and be like, nope, that can't happen.
They will say, okay, so on page 143 of your first book, no, he had a long black coat, not a short wool one. Like,
well, or things like, no, you said 7 years ago he was doing this, but this book, which happens a year later, and you said 8 years ago, well, was he in California or New York? Which one? It can't be in both. And it's like, so you have to kind of make sure that timelines, and so that's kind of been the most challenging, is just kind of is making sure, like you said, that everything from a consistency standpoint is kind of there.
And then the worst part, and then I think the worst mistake is that character died. Actually, you can't bring him back. Magic. Magic.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Wizard did it. There we go. Problem solved.
Yeah. And that's not true, because I mean, come on, Dean and Sam came back to life how many times?
Oh, jeez, yeah.
So there was actually a funny joke later in the season. It was like season 13 or something like that, when they were doing something, and I don't remember if it was Dean said it to Sam or Sam said it to Dean. They're like, it's like, if you do that, you could get killed. And he's like, so? it's like the context, and is like, I'll just come back in like 2 episodes.
Right? It's like death has no consequence for us. Brad, what would you say are some of the elements that make a really great story, and how do you kind of incorporate these into your own writing?
Ooh, that's a good question. So really, to me, what makes a good story, definitely it's engaging. It's falling in love with the characters, and even not even necessarily just the good guys, but also, even if you don't kind of fall in love with the bad guys, you still there's almost an understanding, or you're like, oh yeah, I kind of see why they did that. There's some kind of motivation, and some you with all the characters, like, they're not flat, they're not just two-dimensional and just there. You breathe life into them. And I think with any story, if as a reader you can understand the motivations, or the why characters are doing something, that as a reader sets up a very good story at that point. I always hate it when you have characters that are just like they do something stupid for no damn good reason, and you're like, well, is that just lazy writing? I mean, you randomly throw a kid in to do something dumb. It's like, really? I mean, I remember Walking Dead used to be real bad about that, especially when Carl was young, and it's like,
fucking Carl.
It's like, he hasn't learned yet, for the love of God. I mean, come on. And so, so I think as a writer, and or as a reader, I'd say, if it's an engaging plot, if the characters are not just, a two-dimensional, just flat character that's there, but they do, as an author, you breathe life into them. And again, you kind of are able to take your readers on that kind of roller coaster of emotions. That, to me, is what sets up a really good story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely no good when your characters are there just to be kind of cannon fodder. They're there to just be like bodies to kind of stack
the red
up.
shirts.
Exactly. Yeah, the red shirts. There's actually a comic series called that right now, so I'm loving that.
For those of you who don't understand, that's an old Star Trek reference.
Exactly. Ask your parents; they will tell you.
Yeah. Every time they needed somebody new to die, he happened to be wearing a red shirt.
Yep. Except for Scotty. He survived.
Except for Scotty.
And that was it.
Yes.
Now, Brett, I also saw that you have audiobook versions of all your books so far, which I love because I'm a consumer of audiobooks, and you have multiple VAs over the years. What's the process for finding these people, and how do you know when you have someone that just works for you?
And I have audiobooks for all of them except, so Night Crew 2, we're actually searching for a narrator right now. So that's the only one I don't have. But yeah, the other books I have out, they are on Audible, and the process. So I've been fortunate, and like I've worked with a publisher on all my works, and so I know we get auditions from usually through like ACX and all that. You kind of post out there, and people, those who are narrators, will find the sample that we send them, and they read that sample. And I then they send me a whole bunch of clips of all these different narrators, and I go through and start listening. And really, it's who is that kind of that magic voice that I'm kind of searching, that to me helps to kind of really bring the story to life, while at the same time not kind of getting in the way of the story, because you want the narration to almost be invisible, so to say. You don't want the person telling the story to get in the way of the story. So it's finding that nice little kind of perfect mix. And I know there was in Night Crew, the guy who was, as I listened to him, I was like, yeah, I was like, is very nice, good, soothing voice. I think he was actually British, and which none of the characters are. He was able to kind of portray, and his annotation of things and stuff was, it kind of really kind of fit the kind of inner monologue with it being in first person and stuff of the characters. And so I really enjoyed him. There's one I have a Christmas horror book that's out, called To Hell with Hallmark, and the guy who narrated it, there was the scene that we had sent them had to do with this guy who's run off the road, and he has to call a tow truck driver, and the tow truck driver shows up, and is this very beautiful woman, but she's a werewolf, and she ends up doing what werewolves do to unsuspecting travelers. And so as he's reading about how all the horrible things that she's doing to this guy, and he just made it sound so beautiful. And and so I was like, it got to that point, and I was like, oh, he's the guy. It's like, it was just like, I did theater once, and I used to do theater back in college, and I remember we did the play 1776, and a lot of it, it's one lady, she was playing Adam's wife, and she had to have this very southern accent. And I remember the director saying, he's like, you need to have such a southern accent that the word vomit just sounds pretty. And and so when I was listening to like this guy talk about all these horrible things that this werewolf is doing to this guy, and I was like, oh my God, it sounds so perfect and so beautiful. And so it kind of reminded me of that. And so I was like, yeah, he's so the guy. So yeah, it's just you hear it, and you hear the different auditions. Some of them you listen to and you're like, nope. And, you're like 10 seconds in, you're like, nope, not the person. But then others, like I said, you just hear that voice, and it's like, yeah, that's the one I want.
You've nailed it when they can give you this gruesome, brutal death scene. You think, that was wonderful.
It was so amazing.
Do it again, please.
I know.
Do you find that just the books take on a whole new life with this? I mean, like, obviously it's different format, different media, but do you find the books have this whole like different feeling in the audio version?
Oh yeah, because I mean, when I'm reading a story, I know the pacing and the intonations that I have, that I have in my head as I'm reading it. But hearing somebody else read it, you're like, oh, I didn't think of kind of saying it that way, or I didn't think of it, And so everybody kind of takes on, as you're reading a story, you kind of take on a different tone than I may have not necessarily thought of as reading it, or when writing it. And so yeah, hearing narrators as they're reading it back, and I'm like, oh, I like the way she said that. That was, oh, that sounded a lot more devious than how I was thinking it. And so it, yeah, hearing it back in those different like the auditions, and even especially once we pick a narrator and they go through and they get into the story, it's very eye-opening in hearing it back, not in your own voice or the voice you had in your head, or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
How other people interpret the words that you have written.
Yeah. Did you ever have a character voice that made you think, holy shit, I never thought they would sound like that?
Not yet. Not necessarily yet. Yeah, I said not yet. Not necessarily yet. I mean, the narrators have that I've had have been very kind of true to form to some of the voicings and stuff. Now, again, like I said, now how they kind of pace the dialogue and things like that has been, some of them are kind of like how I thought they would be. Others, they'll say a line, where they put the emphasis a little, more on this word than this word, and it's like, oh, that takes on a little different meaning when you do it like that. So there's been that kind of stuff, but from just a voicing in of itself, not yet.
Yet. I like that.
Yes.
Okay, so we are coming down to the end of this conversation, Brad, but I do want to ask about what you're reading now. Like, who are some of the writers that are filling your bookshelf?
I do read a lot of indie horror. A lot of the other folks who are, in the genre and doing the same kind of stuff I'm doing. I love supporting indie. Occasionally I'll kind of jump over and, read, I'll grab a Stephen King book or something like that. But like right now I'm reading Dan Franklin's Still Machines. So I'm reading it right now, enjoying it. I've got a copy of Extinction Dream by Andrew Nyberg that I'm that's on my TBR. There's one that just recently came out from Crystal Lake called Humbug that I'm about to start on after Still Machines. So just because it's the Christmas season, I was like, oh, this would be a quick little good Christmas read. So I definitely would read that one. But yeah, I usually try to stick with a lot of the indie, just because I love supporting indie authors. I'm fortunate to call a lot of them friends of mine, and we all kind of support each other. About every one of them that I know, we all kind of believe that, kind of a rising tide raises all ships. And so it is a great community. And so I try to participate and contribute as much as I can in, helping others who are also, kind of in the same place and stuff that I am.
I like that. I really do. Also, Dan Franklin, fucking love his stuff.
Yeah, he's an awesome he's an awesome guy. I've had a chance to hang out with him a couple times. Don't arm wrestle him because he is really good.
Keep that in mind.
At Books and Brews this past August, we one evening, we were all arm wrestling Dan, and I don't think he lost. So afterwards I was like, time to research how to arm wrestle better.
Right. Exactly. Of course, the big question, Brad, is what's next for you?
From a writing standpoint, I am in the middle of a standalone novel that I'm writing. I'm not going to give anything away on it. Just know it takes place in Siberia. So that's a fun little setting to write in. So different than some of the other stuff I've done. So I have a standalone, and then gonna start on book 4 for the Night Crew series. Book 3 is in the middle of editing right now, and so it's slated to come out in July of 26, I believe. Other than that, I have some events that I'm kind of starting to gear up for. This year is kind of ramping down, and as we get into January, I'll be at Dark Drafts in Pennsylvania. I'll be at AuthorCon in Virginia, and then there's a thing here in Texas called Big Texas Terror that I'll be at in I think it's in the end of February, beginning of March, down in San Antonio. So that's gonna be fun. Events are starting to pile up for 26, and so looking forward to all that. Somewhere in there, I will squeeze in, make sure you're right, and also do a couple of my own podcasts and get those recorded.
I love it. All right. Well, folks, we've told you everything. Now here is what you do. You go to bradricks, RICKS.com. Everything is there. Get your copy of Night Crew. Get your copy of Night Crew 2. Get the audiobooks. Get To Hell with Hallmark. I love that title, by the way. There's so much to explore. And as we always say, leave reviews. Let us know, what's your favorite part, a favorite character, chapter? Did you like the ending? Did you like the beginning? And Brad, thank you once again for joining the show. It's been awesome talking to you.
I appreciate it. And thanks for the opportunity to come and chat for a little while.
Thanks for listening to this episode. And please subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. It ensures you never miss an episode and helps our ranking, allowing others to discover the podcast more easily.
If you really liked it,
please share it with a friend and join our Citywide Blackout Facebook community, along with following us on Instagram at CitywideMax and at Citywide Interviews.
I'm your host, Max Bowen,
And I'm Curtis Hughes.
and we'll see you all next time.